So let's call this meeting of the HHR Building Committee to order at 6:06 p.m. First order of business is approving the meeting minutes from the December 21st meeting. Can I get a motion to approve? Dave moves. Jameson seconds. All in favor, aye. Great. Any members of the public here who wish to be heard during the public comment section? Wow. Okay. No public comment. Then let's move on to the chair's report. A slight change in the order. We'll have Jill report on Board of Education, and then I'll report on P&Z and Architectural Review Board with input as necessary from Eric, who was there leading the charge for us. So Jill, if you have a minute to touch on the BOE meetings that took place, I guess, on the 10th.
Yep. We presented, Travis presented the development documents. He really highlighted the differences between what we had seen in schematic design and what we've changed since then. Principally things like the entry at the Holmes School. Overall, very positive reception. Board members were very pleased. It passed with a few questions, things people wanted to clarify or confirm, but overall people were very pleased. One of the questions that came up was the use of bollards, which I've already passed on to Eric, and certainly Travis did as well. So that brings up the point that we might just want to cross-reference a few security options between Oxbridge and our building committee to make sure that we understand best practice versus what are things that they may have defined as just for that campus because it's the way it is. So that's to come. Otherwise, there were a few things like confirmation that we're looking carefully at the soundproofing between the Holmes gym and the Holmes library. We knew that was a critical condition. But no, overall, people were happy to see the change to the Henley campus and the way the bus loop is working and traffic. So, always exciting when a board is pleased to see your work. And thanks to Travis for outlining all the work we've been doing.
Great. Thanks, Jill. I guess I would say a little bit more drama at the P&Z meeting that was occurring at the same time. Eric and Joe Canis primarily presented the current designs for both the Henley School and the Royal School. We'll take the easy one, which was Royal, which P&Z did not have many comments on at all. They closed the public hearing on that school. We spent a lot more time on Henley. Most of the discussions at Henley were around stormwater management. P&Z had given us pretty substantial comments about stormwater design at the prior P&Z presentation. Joe Canis went back to the drawing board in a big way to revise and refine that. Spent a lot of time describing the differences as well as the very, very significant improvements over what the existing conditions are. The other thing that got a fair amount of attention in terms of public comment was the extended bus loop and traffic patterns on Nearwater. That P&Z kind of, if you will, glossed over pretty quickly. Glossed over is probably not right, but accepted our design pretty readily. The issue with the stormwater system at Henley is that the design team designed the best, most optimal system possible for the campus and for the existing town infrastructure into which the on-campus system has to plug in and drain. Part of the reason that some of the neighbors remain concerned is that the existing, in some cases, circa 1949 infrastructure is old, in some cases, not necessarily fully adequate to handle the volume of stormwater that may be coming off the school, even with the much more high capacity retention system that Joe developed. At the end of the day, we've had follow-up conversations with some of the members of the town DPW, as well as the selectman's office. My understanding is that, and Joe, this may have already happened, but DPW, Ed Gentile, was going to try to coordinate a meeting with you and with the peer review engineer from Redness and Mead to sit down and see what, if anything, could be done in terms of changing flow directions, changing percentages between pasture lane and near water, et cetera. I guess I would ask, if you haven't heard from Ed Gentile within the next 24 hours, let me know and I'll remind him. I saw him today in town hall, and that was specifically, one of the things that we talked about. But otherwise, P&Z closed the public hearing for Hinley. What that means is now P&Z has to deliberate on Hinley and Royal and come to a decision as to whether or not they're going to approve those designs, which they are targeting Monday, the 7th of February for the date. The Monday, is it Monday? Tuesday, the 7th of February, to vote on a resolution approving those designs. There's a similar presentation for Holmes next Tuesday, the 24th of January, with the view that Holmes would be on the same timeline as Hinley and Royal for final P&Z approval. Eric, before I move to ARB, any thoughts, comments, expansion?
No, I think you pretty much covered that. It was a long evening, but we ultimately got what we needed to get accomplished, which was closing the public hearing and getting them on a schedule to provide the information necessary so that we can then go to the town and go for town permitting. The process is, once we have planning board approval, then we can go through the town process, and then once we have the town process through that, and that typically takes 3 or 4 weeks, then we can go and commence the state process for approvals.
Approvals meaning building permits, or is it interim approval prior to initial building permits?
It is building permits.
Okay.
Dave can probably go into a greater level of detail there, but it's basically set up so that we can get a building permit so that we can go out to bid.
Okay.
Yeah, we can,
And
Chris. What we can
go
do
ahead,
is
Dave.
when we get to that part, if you want, I can introduce Laurel to those who haven't met her yet, and we can talk through what we've been doing and some of the dates coming up, and some of you have seen some of the meetings that we're scheduling with the state and things like that. So we can talk through the interdependency of some of these various approvals with different approvals from we need to the state to go to the bid, so we can touch upon that in our update.
Yeah, that would be super to sort of take us from, where we are today, right? The state of play today, and assuming we get P&Z approval on the 7th, what the next steps and phases are. That would be really good to get some more visibility into for folks who haven't been down this road before. Architectural Review Board is a component of the P&Z approval. They are an advisory board that has to make a recommendation to P&Z. P&Z wants to see, ideally, a favorable letter from the Architectural Review Board as part of their deliberation process. Last night, Eric and his team, including Lauren and Sean from the landscape architect, presented for the 3rd time to the Architectural Review Board on all 3 schools. Last night's meeting was primarily to go over specific responses that the design team had to specific comments that the ARB had made from the last presentation. In particular, landscaping and some of the designs around the school entrances, including the side entrance at Hinley and the primary entrance at Holmes. Good news is that Architectural Review Board at the end of Eric's presentation last evening basically signed off. There were a few comments that they're going to send to us in writing on what I would describe as kind of more marginal items, but they basically approved the concept and told us that they would be sending the favorable recommendation to P&Z. So that's terrific news as well. Check one more box in the process. Eric, anything that I missed on that?
No, I think that was perfect.
No editorializing allowed.
Yes, we'll just leave it at that. It's been
Yeah.
a long process, and ultimately they were positive towards us last night. That they were appreciative of the fact that they felt that we had listened, we had made modifications that improved the design on all 3 campuses.
Perfect. Why don't we
Just at
go
a
ahead,
high
Jill?
level, or the marginal item, when you say marginal items, does that mean, a few trees here, there, and the other place that we wouldn't notice, or is there something the committee would want to be aware of?
No, it was things like, would we consider adding additional stone benches at the entrance to Hinley? Would we consider another tree here, another tree there? Would we consider painting the door at Holmes blue? Which one did I miss? Any, Eric? Benches in the playground at Royal, at the far end of Royal, so that moms and nannies could hang out after school with their kids.
So I guess the one comment would be on the Royal entrance, and that we said that the landscape and hardscape that we were sharing with them last night would be part of the project. And this is the landscape in front of the building and the entrance facade of the building. But the potential improvements which were addressing the facade and the canopy in front of the entrance were not part of this project. They were ideas that we shared with the committee as well as with them to show that there are things that we can do, but it's not part of the project. If the school board decides at some point that there's extra money or there's other funding sources to do that, that this would be an idea as a place that they could spend that money, but we provide no guarantee related to any sort of additional work to the entrance of Royal.
Okay, thank you. We have a caller on the line. Would you please identify yourself so I can put you in for the notes? Does anyone know who caller 1 is? Someone who's just called in?
John O'Neill.
John O'Neill. Thank you.
John O'Neill.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. What I was thinking is let's hold any discussion questions on what Jill and I just went through and Eric went through on the chair's report till we get to the update item from KG&D and O&G, and then we can discuss all of this at once if people have items they want to discuss or ask questions about. The next item is the one item that we do need to vote on, and I may ask Dave Cravenzola and Kevin Monrette to describe this more technically, but we have to send out an RFP for the town to retain a commissioning agent for the MEP part of the project. Paul Harding probably knows exactly what we're talking about, but this is one more third party that we need to retain. I believe it's required by the state. We don't have any RFP responses. Kevin has drafted up an RFP working with the town. This RFP process would be essentially the same as the RFP process that we went through with KG&D and O&G and the other candidates for architect and CM, obviously on a much more scaled down basis. We would obviously include the commissioning agent from Ox Ridge so that they can respond and propose. But the idea would be similar kind of process. We would get as many responses as we get. And depending on how many we get, we would either interview them all or we would interview a subset, and then decide on which commissioning agent to retain. Maybe Dave or Paul, you guys can describe for the committee what precisely this contractor does. It looks like they get started pretty much right away, and they're sitting, at the table during the design of the MEP system, and then are there to make sure it's installed in accordance with the plans, and then make sure it actually all runs when you turn the switch on. But that's probably a gross simplification.
It's not a bad simplification, but
no, that's a third-party commissioning agent is going to review the MEP documents from the engineering group, and then they're going to go through and test all the equipment and make sure that it functions per code, per state, per all the requirements of the design. And because one thing, contractor will install this, and they'll do it with the subcontractor, but then someone needs to oversee that it's done correctly and that it's tested and that everything works properly, especially when you're talking about the school systems. So it's an integral part of a large project like this, especially any new switchgear, any new MEP equipment, the controls will be tested and make sure that everything checks out. And there'll be a myriad of reports that they'll fill out to verify that everything was tested and is working. And they'll put it through its paces. We'll do things like, we'll pull the plug on the electric to make sure that the automatic transfer switches and the generators go on, and just stuff like that, just for examples.
Would you be willing, Paul? Right now, like I said, the idea is the RFP would probably go out later this week. It's the standard town RFP, essentially the same RFP form as was used for Ox Ridge. But when those responses come in, would you be willing to help vet those out and then interview the candidates?
Yes.
Great. Kevin, anything to add on that?
No, that was basically a very good summation by Paul, so thank you. And we have it pretty much all drafted and ready to go pending committee approval.
Great. Any discussion on that item before we move to vote on authorizing the issuance of the RFP? Great. Can I get a motion to authorize Kevin to work with the town to have the RFP for a commissioning agent for the 3 schools issued? Jameson moves. Jill seconds. All in favor? Aye. Great.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. So, Kevin, can you coordinate with Kate and Karen to get that advertised, so we can get that rolling?
Will do.
That'd be awesome. I believe, Jameson, were you able to attend the third staging meeting, Jameson?
I was not. No, I didn't.
Not.
I didn't.
Jill, did you call into that, or did you attend it by Zoom?
No, I think
She
your mic is.
attended the first hour of it or so. Alan,
Okay.
I know, was there, as were the principals.
Hey,
Can you hear me?
Chris, are you talking about the phasing meeting that we had last Wednesday?
Yes.
Maybe
I
Dave,
was
you want to
able
give
to
the
attend that. I just wanted to. We had it as an item because we've been historically giving updates on any material meetings that have gone on, just to bring people up to date as to it happened. Anything material come up that needs to be discussed by the committee. Alan, I'm sorry.
I can give a quick update if you want.
Sure.
Laurel was here and she did a great job for that staging meeting, and Jill was there a good part of the meeting, and Laurel did a good job with the principals and just sort of giving them a template of another district and walked us through the various stages and what it would look like and what it might look like and what she needed our principals to consider. We have met with the principals actually prior to this meeting to try and just sort of get a wee foundation of some thinking and some perspectives on stage, and Laura did a good job just one, reassuring them, also challenging them a little bit, having them plan for meetings that have actually happened this week. Basically give a template of what it would look like if it was for our district, and that was very helpful, and it gave plans for the principals to go back and do the basically be prepared to plan what you have, where everybody is right now, and to come back with what it might look for the next two levels of the stage. And so I'll let her speak to it. Laurel's here, I see, and she did a great job with it. It's been helpful, and I think the meetings subsequently have been informative. They've had meetings with the principals, and I'll let her sort of talk to that. But it was a good kickoff and a helpful kickoff, I think. But I'll let Laurel, if she wants to speak to any other specifics or how she felt the meeting went.
So if I could just interject really quick, I wanted to just, you know.
Are you with us too, David? Sorry.
No, I don't need to get credit for being at the meeting. It's okay. But I did just want to introduce Laurel. I don't know if you remember, you know, when we presented and we talked about the structure of the project and organizing, and Laurel is the pre-construction manager. So similar to how, you know, George is going to be the project manager when boots hit the ground in construction, Laurel is heading up the pre-construction effort. And one of the main specialties that she brings to this is, you know, bringing together all these pre-construction activities and having these meetings with the end users on how they currently use their space, how they're going to organize themselves, and how we're going to plan out in detail the work going ahead. So I'll let Laurel kind of give a brief overview of what the efforts have been to date, and then you know, Chris, I got your question there. So you know, Laurel will talk about what we have for upcoming meetings. I think there's some things coming up where we have to make sure that we have some specific building committee and board of ed meetings at least on the horizon, so that we have those approvals for these subsequent meetings with the state, and then also explain to you really what can be expected when we start to go into more and more meetings with OSCG&R. So with that, I'll turn it over to Laurel, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you. And then what I was hoping is, so that's great. So let's do that, and then maybe once Laurel's done, what I was thinking of in terms of updates is Eric and Dave, if you guys can give us updates, it's probably Eric and Travis, on sort of status of construction drawings, you know, kind of what you project the timeline on those, and then, you know, the remaining permitting and approval processes for the, you know, for the near term, just so people can have a sense as to what the, you know, what's coming around the corner, if you will. So Laurel, go ahead.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Laurel Purcell, and I'll probably be answering a lot of questions regarding your timing of the design completion with what I'm going to be talking about with the update. So, well, I guess I'm just talking about staging now, right?
Well, you can talk about the phasing meeting first, and then you can roll
it into where we are. Okay, yep. So the phasing meetings, we had what we called an initial phasing kickoff meeting on Wednesday, the 11th. Again, just reiterating, it was very well received. We had our first real true phasing meeting yesterday with each of the three principals. They were all fully prepared. They had ideas. We vetted those ideas, and then, you know, a couple of them have some homework assignments, but very small. I will be meeting with them on a weekly basis. I will be providing materials for them to review and approve. So it's an ongoing iterative process. I meet with them, I get feedback. I will go back and print it all up, so it's all in writing, so that by the time we're done, there'll be very clear, concise pictorials as far as where we're going to be in the building at certain times of the year. So we're anticipating it to take 5 more meetings. It may or may not. These meetings will continue weekly until about the end of February. And then we will just spend a little bit of time once we're done with these building phasing meetings, just going around outside again, just making sure the site logistics plans kind of get all wrapped up, just finalize all of them. These phasing meetings that will turn into phasing plans that will actually be part of the bid documents, that the contractors know exactly where they're going to be in the building and what time they'll be there. So it's also presentation materials for you as well. You can see where we're planning on working and how we're planning on getting all the work done. We've talked since the last building committee meeting. I'm not sure if you guys were aware, but there is this issue with procurement of switchgear, electrical switchgear, which is the main power to the building, still tends to be extremely long lead item, about a year. So we have agreed, the design team and ONG have agreed to prepare what we're going to call it a phase one. Phase one meaning the state, OSC GNR looks at phases of the project. So this will be broken out as an early enabling, we're going to call it a procurement, early electrical switchgear procurement package that will allow us to at least purchase the switchgear. There's a lot of work that has to happen after the switchgear shows up on site in installation wise. And if we're talking about a year and we're trying to complete the additions for next school year, there's a significant issue with making sure that we can get the switchgear on time. So what was explained as far as these PCR meetings, there's these meetings that we have to go up to for OSC GNR, and what they do is they bless us, they provide their input as the design progresses. So they've already had the schematic design. There's design development, they call DDR meetings. Those are all scheduled to be held on February 15th and 16th. So those are the design development review meetings for all three schools. Those are all going to be held virtually with OSC GNR. So I think you guys were aware of those meetings. I'm not sure. But anyhow, the 15th and 16th.
Are those the February 22nd meetings that we got calendars for?
No, the 15th and 16th are DDR meetings. And what happens when we go up there, there's checklist. The state always has a checklist. They go down their checklist to make sure they have this, they have that. They're looking for certain letters. They're looking for certain things in the design. So it's just going through that checklist. They'll also want to see our cost estimate. So that will also be presented to them. And it's just an opportunity for the state to provide feedback to the design team. You as the owner, usually superintendent attends these.
I was going to say, who would you typically, I know some members of the building committee attended the last version, which I think was the schematic, or the design was the schematic meeting. What optimally, who would you want to have there?
From the owner side, optimally, it would be the superintendent of schools, and maybe sometimes the facilities managers show up. But these are boring meetings, so you don't want to torture. Nobody wants to be tortured sitting through these.
Is there anything that needs to be done in advance by members of the committee to help prep for those meetings? You talk, and unless I'm confusing things, like, Paul is kind of our expert on MEP. Does he need to look at specs for switchgear and things like that? Is that part of these meetings, or is that something different?
No, we want to be expecting people on the owner side to be presenting and doing any sort of work for the DDR meeting. Usually you would just be attending. The work is the onus of the effort is usually on the design team and us with our estimate. And again, we're just presenting the projects for the state to review and provide us feedback. That's really the only purpose of the DDR meetings, these meetings that are on the 15th and 16th. They don't bless us. They don't say you can't keep going. It's just like a check. It's just a progress check on the design. What is following?
Well, can I back you up?
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, pre-purchase package for the electrical switchgear. Where are we with coordination study? That can't go out. Where are we with the coordination study for the electrical switchgear?
That would be a question for the electrical engineer. I'm not sure where they are. The commitment is to have the documents ready for February 3rd. We're supposed to be, that's the February 21st and 22nd. Those are the PCR meetings, again, with the state.
Because we met in August. We met in August, and we all said priority one was to get the coordination study so that we all knew that switchgear is, some odd 67, 70 weeks out, and that we needed that so that we would be ready to roll with a pre-purchase electrical package for phase 1 and phase 2. And that was supposed to be before the end of the year. So now we're in February, and I don't hear anybody saying we've got a coordination study ready.
Yeah, Paul, I think we can let Travis or Eric talk a little more to that. I do think that that time frame slipped a little bit when we were in that limbo section there of rehashing the MEP approach to the project. Because
Okay.
that's what I recall from some of those meetings, but I'll let the design team. I know no one from BGA is on the call, but I think it was the MEP design had to get to a certain point before they were able to settle on the gear.
Right. The switchgear couldn't have been released any earlier than where they are in the design. So I need to follow up because I don't know where we are with the coordination study specifically. So I need to follow up on that and get back to you, Paul.
Right.
Can I ask specifically that you, Travis, connect with Brdg and Gallagher and loop Paul in and have that conversation directly?
I need to jump on them as well because I need to go sit with them and do a full page turn and get really involved. And I, unfortunately, I was, really out of it, sick for about 15 days with this stupid flu. So, over the holiday. But my thing is, as if to the committee members who are not aware, we can't buy switchgear if we don't have a proper coordination study of what we're getting. So it's critical because it gives us the readings and the settings for all the gear that we need and make sure it works with the buildings we have. So it's the roadmap electrically of what we need to do. So,
all right. So Paul, I just want to alleviate your fear somewhat in that the coordination study is not done because there is going to be some time frame between now and when we actually anticipate going out to bid for the switchgear. So there's a whole process. We got to go up to the state and they've got to review and approve it. And then we got, so I'm anticipating being able to go out to bid for these March 9th. So that will give you some time frame. We're about 5 or 6.
If we can get, maybe it was generated and I haven't seen it, but a list of what we need for phase 1 switchgear, even if the coordination study is not done, that it can be identified. So we are looking at where we're going to be when this stuff hits the ground versus what we're supposed to be doing construction wise. I'm hoping that they can break that out for us, saying, because if we're building a room at Hinley we're talking about around gear, but we don't have the gear, and then we can't do X amount with phase 1 or phase 2. So that's all I'm looking for is to make sure that equipment is identified, coordination study is done, and that we're not impacting the short windows we have to do construction in these phases because we all, we lapsed a month, 2 months, and now we know this stuff's a year out. That's my main concern.
Yeah, the purpose of this first package is literally just to order the switchgear. So all we're trying to do is place the order to get us in the hopper. So we're going to do everything we can just to release the switchgear. That's the purpose of this first package. So those meetings are going to happen for all 3 schools on February 21st and 22nd. Now that's a PCR meeting, plan completion review. So that's a step beyond the design development. Different checklist, go up to the state, different checklist. We need another cost estimate. And for the PCR meeting, that is where we need building committee sign off and Board of Ed approval. So I know you have a 2:15 building committee meeting, which we will need on the 15th for the building committee to sign. You're going to need to vote and approve the documents as well as the estimate. We also need Board of Ed approval. So I don't know if there's a Board of Ed meeting somewhere scheduled around between the 2:15 and before we go up on the 21st. So that's just
for phase 1, right, Laura?
For phase 1.
There is not, definitely not one planned in that window. The board goes, or the school district is on holiday that Friday, and for the following week. So
What usually happens is for these types of meetings, there's usually a special meeting that is held jointly between the building committee and Board of Ed, so you both can hear it and you both can do your meetings and do it all in one shot.
Is there materials that need to be prepared and distributed ahead of that to make those meetings more efficient?
I don't know what the cost estimate can be distributed ahead of time. It may make sense to make the documents available or just walk you through them at the meeting. And that may make more sense just to walk you through them at the meeting, just so you see what we're doing.
Is it realistic, Jill, to get the Board of Ed to join an HHR meeting, or can it be done with a subcommittee of the Board of Ed?
I think if you need approval, you can't have a subcommittee, but I would suggest that I'm looking for when our February. We have a meeting on the 14th. Can we ask HHR to join us on the 14th?
I can do that.
You're wrecking everybody's Valentine's Day, just so you know.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
we have
but I
that.
love these folks so much that actually is my Valentine's Day.
What's that?
I love you guys so much that actually is my Valentine's Day.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we can work those logistics out, but what you're that's probably easier said than done.
Well, and what I suggest we do is after, as a result of tonight's meeting, why don't Laurel and I work together and we'll put together a list of just of the meeting deadlines and send it to Jill and Chris, so that we can then start to coordinate some dates. We'll also send it to Dr. Radley as well. So just from the board and building committee standpoint, there's an understanding of over the next few months, this is what we're looking for.
So, and just to help your process, so you have a sense of what we're starting from, if you go to darien.ct.gov to the meetings tab, all of our meetings are populated in the calendar. So that just would help, not HHR, because we've been running HHR more ad hoc, but all the standing meetings are in the calendar.
Is there any reason from a process standpoint, Jill, that HHR could not join the BOE meeting for this one presentation and action item?
No, it could be a joint meeting for this action item.
Okay. Well, why don't we talk offline about and poll the HHR committee members about availability as to whether that could work.
Okay, so that's the PCR meeting for the phase one early enabling package. That means that the rest of the project, the remaining construction, is all going to be considered phase two in the state's eyes. It'll be a phase two. We have since scheduled those PCR meetings. Hindley and Royal are on March 28th and March 29th. And then Holmes is following on April 12th. So there's plenty of time to get organized as far as, again, you need building committee meeting and Board of Ed approvals ahead of these meetings. And as Dave mentioned, we'll just give you the dates and back it up from there.
And I think what just one little sidebar here is that I don't think, Chris or Jill, that you were included in the invitations from Angela for the PCR meetings, those phase one meetings, right? Because you knew about the meetings on the 14th and 15th, or no?
No, I think it's the other way around. I think I got the one on the 22nd.
Okay, all right. So I'll make sure that you have those other meetings, because here's one thing that we found out in the last few weeks too, is that generally what was happening is when you needed to go up to the state, you gave them a week or a couple week heads up on meetings, and they could usually fit you into their slots. What they've told us is that, remember that HVAC program, Dave Martin, you knew about that. Remember we were trying to see if we could qualify for that in some way? Well, that program, I guess, has put a huge burden on Office of School Grants as far as meetings with municipalities and things. So their time frame for setting up meetings has drastically elongated, which is why we had to wait until the 14th or 15th for those DDRs, even though we received approval on the DD package from the Board of Ed last week. So because of that, we said, all right, we want to just go and set up a bunch of other meetings so that when we're ready, we don't have to wait longer. So I think in their haste of setting them up, I think they neglected to include some people on those invites. So I'll double back through those and make sure that Eric and Travis and Kevin and Dr. Radley and Jill and Chris are included in all those invitations.
So we only need the building committee and Board of Ed approvals for these PCR meetings. So again, we have 3 phase 1 PCR meetings, which are all on the 21st and 22nd. And we have 3 phase 2 PCR meetings. 2 of them are at the end of March. 1 is in the middle of April, April 12th. The whole deal with this OSCGNR, again, they have separate checks. So they have a separate checklist for each school project. And again, it's a matter of letters that they need to receive from the design team. There's a lot of letters that need to be provided. Superintendent's going to have to do a lot of signing because they all have to be signed by the district. Again, they need our cost estimate. So usually there's pieces of information that tend to lag. They need to be followed up on. That's why it takes about 2 to 3 weeks just to get through the whole process before there's an actual formal letter that OSCGNR issues that says, okay, everything is good. The project may be let out to bid. Until I see that letter in writing, we don't go out to bid because that jeopardizes your reimbursement. So we have to do everything we can to follow the state's checklist, give them all the information that they need so that we can be on go. Sometimes if we're held up on P&Z, let's say we don't have final P&Z approval, sometimes the OSCGNR, more often than not, will allow us to go out for bid, even though we don't have P&Z approval, but you can't award a contract until P&Z approval comes in. So that gives us a little more time to go out bid, scope reviews, it buys us about another month and a half or so to get through the P&Z process, if that applies.
But assuming, let's just be optimistic for a minute. Assuming P&Z passes resolutions approving the 3 projects on February the 7th, how does that fit into your timeline?
That's fine because we're not going up to the state for those final PCR meetings until the end of March.
Okay, all right.
So they may say on February 21st and 22nd, oh, where are you? And you may or may not have it, but it's really just to buy the switchgear. So hopefully they're not going to hold up everything.
Yeah, well, that was my next question. Do you need, I want to make sure I'm not confusing myself, which is, do you need or do we need state approval via a PCR meeting in order to do the pre-purchase of the switchgear?
Yes. In order to go out to bid, you have to have that piece of paper, that letter saying project may be let out for bid. Without that, you will not get reimbursement. So that's
even for that one kind of discrete pre-purchase item.
Correct. Anything you want to buy, even your FF&E, is going to have to go up to the state, and they're going to have to prove it and say, yes, you may go ahead and purchase it once they've had a chance to look at it. They need to review and approve the documents before they can go out to bid.
Okay, got it.
So it's really just the PCR meetings that you need BC, Building Committee and Board of Ed approval for. And then just big picture with where we are in the scheme of things. So the anticipated date of going out to bid for phase 1 to try to get the switchgear going, we have March 9th, all 3 schools. The anticipated date for going out to bid for phase 2, Hindley and Royal, remember they're about 2 weeks ahead of the 3rd school. We have April 24th as our target. We don't need building committee approval to go out to bid. We just need the letter from the state. And then the anticipated date going out to bid for phase 2 Holmes is May 1st. Our anticipated date of starting construction on site at all 3 schools is July 12th. So our target on site, boots on the ground, when you start to see us, is going to be July 12, 2023. That's if everything goes according to a pre-construction schedule that I have prepared based on these dates.
And then,
can I just?
Go ahead, Laurel.
Yeah, no. So one thing too is, if you just give us just a little bit of time, we can also publish you an update on that schedule, so you have it as well. Chris, we'll send it to you.
That'd be very helpful.
We'll send it to the chairs, and then you can distribute to the rest of the committee. I'll get with Laurel as far as a date that we can get that just like cleaned up, looking nice and published to you, and we'll get that out just so you have it. One of the things I do want to mention to you is that we did have a meeting a couple weeks ago with the design team, just trying to make sure we were in alignment on the deliverable date for the construction documents. And Eric and Travis can chime in as they want, but we in knowing that it was critical to get the construction documents package by early February to maintain that trajectory of being on site in July. We are making a revision in that we have asked KG&D to provide us with those documents the beginning of February, but in turn, those documents are going to be 90% construction documents, not 100% construction documents, meaning that as we are going through the estimate process, sorry, my light goes out here periodically, that KG&D and the design team will be still finalizing things in those documents so that, we're not essentially taking that extra 3 to 4 weeks of time that would then come away from the start on site. Travis, you want to add to that?
Yeah, the goal for the February 3rd is to start this process. We have to start with town review with the building department, the fire department, DOH. So they don't need 100% documents to review. So we will have what we need to get the permitting started on the town side. So that starts the clock because you need those approvals before you can then meet with state and go through their design. So while that's being reviewed at town, I'm sure they'll come back with comments that we'll have to address. And in addition, we'll continue to prep the documents for the state submission, which is, close to a full-on bid package when we submit to state. So there's a lot of like smaller details that we can be working on, additional sections, etc., that's not needed for permit, but will be important for bid documents.
Dave, does it make sense for the updating dates and updating on what Laurel's been describing for you guys to update? You probably can't see it, but the pre-construction matrix schedule that you guys did, kind of the bar graph.
That's the update that I mentioned that we're going to get published here in the next few days. I just wanted to coordinate Laurel's schedule on that with what she's doing with those phasing meetings.
But it may be helpful in addition to that for those for to just literally do a list of upcoming meetings over the next 90 days. Just a separate cover page that would be helpful to just have as kind of an easy desk reference.
Yes.
Eric, I'm sorry.
One clarification I want to make, because we've used February 3rd and February 7th, 2 different dates. The earliest planning and zoning will issue their resolution is February 7th. We cannot start, the town will not start the building permit review process until they receive notice from the planning and zoning. So that means that we are basically, from that schedule that Dave was mentioning, 4 days behind.
Not really. There's a weekend in there. The 3rd is a Friday. By the time documents go out on, if it's Monday, it's a couple days. But yeah, correct. When we can get them up, we can't submit to town. I'm sure Laurel will want them as soon as she can get them for estimating.
Yes. Yeah, we've got estimating and again all the other reviews. In theory, your commissioning agent should be on board reviewing them at that time too.
Right.
Great. And then separate and apart from the state schedules, I know, we approved directing KG&D to get going on construction drawings. Does that happen in parallel with the pre-construction work and the state meetings and approvals that Laurel's describing, or is that part of that process? Maybe you guys can just describe how those things.
No, we're well into construction documents. That's what we're putting together for this for the permit submission. So that 90% set, that's construction documents, like 90%.
Right. And
they go down.
Yeah, and on that subject, just back to what we were saying with regard to MEP and Bldg Gallagher, their aspect of that, please loop Paul in so that he's giving input sooner rather than later?
Yes, I will review that with them.
Okay.
We'll schedule something with Paul.
Anything else by way of update from KG&D and ONGAP?
That's really the majority. I mean, Laurel hit the dates all pretty well and laid out the process. So that was the big one. I would just add that with the paperwork, there is some paperwork that will require some back and forth with the district, and I'll work with Kevin and Alan on that we might need some answers. But it's started with the schematic design doc checklist, so it just gets more and more involved as we go. I think there is a standard space planning exercise that we will need to do, so I'm sure I'll be leaning on Kevin and Alan for some input on that.
Any questions, discussion items from the members of the committee with respect to what we just heard from the design and construction teams? Great. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Laurel. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Travis and Eric. That was super helpful. I didn't have any. Paul, did you have something you needed to add? I saw you just pop on. No. Sarah?
Sorry, guys. I'm trying to fix the camera sideways. I've got the.
Yes, you are.
I just got home. I apologize.
No worries. I did not have any other business items. Jill, anything that you needed to add? So our next meeting.
Well, actually, just quickly, the design team did meet and do some work with the librarians, just so the committee's aware, and the schools, just to look at fixtures, not fixtures, well, actually in some cases fixtures, but to look at finishes, also to go through how the libraries are going to be placed. Things continue to move forward. This was a lot of what they went through, you saw in the package that was presented to the BOE, but just so you're aware, there was that work that happened in the interim. No.
Next HHR meeting would be February the 1st. Is that correct?
That makes sense with the timeline. I'm going to double check with everyone that makes sense according to what we have as far as meetings and approvals and so forth.
Okay, great.
Thanks, everyone.
And hopefully everybody, fingers crossed, we will have a successful P&Z meeting on the 24th. I think that's the next big item coming up between tonight and our next HHR meeting.
So Dave then and Laurel, can you make sure that Sarah is looped in on any planning for approvals, because she's the one who schedules our meetings, and can make sure that we have a place to be,
Okay,
virtually or otherwise.
So is this for building committee and Board of Ed, both? Or just building committee?
Building committee,
Building
please.
Yeah, Laurel, I think what we'll do though is, I think that the list that's put together really it's going to address both. So if we get it to Chris, Jill, Sarah, and Dr. Radley, I think then we've covered our bases there as far as those two groups.
Yep.
Yeah, and then we'll try to coordinate. We'll try to coordinate to see if we can combine BOE and HHR on some of these PCR pre-approvals that you need.
Right. It boils down
PCR stands again. What does PCR stand for again?
It stands for Plan Completion Review, and it's really boils down to 3 meetings. There's 3 times we need you guys to meet and approve packages, so it's just 3.
Okay. Got it. I had nothing else with that. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Sarah moves. Jill seconds. All in favor? Thank you, everybody. Great to see you all again, and we'll see you all soon, no doubt.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good night.